Good morning. All right. Thank you for joining us for our coffee hour this morning. Today we've got Marissa Marcus with the NRCS RCPP. Marissa is the coordinator for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, known as RCPP, a partner-driven approach to conservation. Marissa will provide an introduction to the program, including what activities can be covered and the process to submit a project proposal. And with that, I'll turn it over to Marissa. And she has asked if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to type them in the chat or shout them out as we go.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. So I'll try to spell out all of the acronyms here throughout the presentation. There will be many. RCPP stands for Regional Conservation Partnership Program. So I'll try not to read directly from my slides throughout the entire presentation, but for the vision or the purpose of RCPP, the vision was to provide the opportunity for NRCS to work with our partners that encourage innovation, have high-performing solutions, can accelerate our conservation mission, and demonstrate the value of voluntary private land conservation. There's 4 pillars for RCPP, and that's going to be impact or conservation benefits. And so this is addressing our resource concerns. Partner contribution, this can be cash or in kind. Innovation, and partnerships and management. So a partner's ability to manage federal dollars, get the federal dollars on the ground. And the 4 pillars of RCPP are important because this is the criteria that when you're submitting a project proposal, the proposal will be evaluated on. Conservation districts make for really great partners because you already have a general understanding of our other programs, or at least likely EQIP. So it's important to understand our other programs when considering RCPP, because RCPP can incorporate all of the program activities. So underneath EQIP, we have our structural and vegetative practices, like gated pipe or cover cropping. And so that's considered a land management activity. Similarly with Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP, or Conservation Reserve Program, CRP. These are going to be our land management and rental activities. Then we have our Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. Most familiar with ACEP ALE, and that's going to be easement acquisition processes. So when we're talking about this for RCPP, it's the entity held easements or US held easements or by protect cell easements. Then NRCS has the Public Law 83566 Watershed Program, which is referred to as the PL 566. For RCPP, we consider this a watershed activity. And then so at the bottom, again, just reiterating, RCPP can capture any of the activities that are covered under our other programs. So this is just reiterating that same point. RCPP activity types. We have land management, the similar program authorities on the right side of the table. So you have EQIP, ACEP, PL 566, CSP would also be included in there. And they broke rentals out, but that's all land management and rental activities. And then you have your ACEP easement activities, which are US held easements, entity held easements, and then you have your watershed projects. Who can apply for RCPP? So this is specifically focusing on who can apply for RCPP when submitting a proposal. So who can submit a proposal is your eligible partners. I'm not going to read who is all eligible as a partner, but this comes from the 7 CFR. It's also listed in our notice of funding opportunity every time there's an opportunity to submit a proposal. Where can RCPP funding be used? So this is really once you have submitted your proposal and you have an active project, where are the financial assistance dollars able to be spent? And it's going to be on eligible land with eligible producers. So this is going to align with EQIP and all of our other programs. Additionally, within your proposal, you identify a project area. So it needs to be within the project area, on that eligible land, and with the eligible landowner. How can RCPP funding be used? So the financial assistance dollars, which sometimes I refer to as FA dollars, can be used to implement those eligible activities on eligible land. So the financial assistance dollars, eligible activities are going to be what we looked at in the previous slides as far as land management activities, easement activities, watershed activities. Then there's technical assistance dollars, which I refer to as TI. There's TA. There's two different kinds of technical assistance dollars. TAI dollars, the implementation dollars, can be used for planning, design, install, and checkout. So those are the dollars used basically to plan. So when you're working with a planner out of an NRCS office, this is the work that they're doing. Technical enhancement dollars are going to be used for outreach and education, project management, and then NRCS, generally, depending on what the type of project we have, is going to retain some of the TA dollars. So the TA dollars are used to pay people. The financial assistance dollars are used to get the conservation on the ground. Why apply for RCPP? I'm not the most creative individual, so I definitely like to leave this to the partners. I think a #1 reason is that the resource concerns are not being addressed under our other programs. There might be a backlog of unfunded projects that we already have designs for. The partner might have skill sets and technical capabilities to provide to the landowners on behalf of NRCS, if there's an NRCS bottleneck. There's also pre-selection of parcels, application bundles. There's different requirements for the easements, so there's some additional flexibilities built in when considering easements. So project type, we have RCPP as our program, and then we have 2 different project types. So we have our alternative funding arrangement, or classic. With the alternative funding arrangement, the partner is providing 100% of the technical assistance. NRCS still has their due diligence items that they're responsible for, and we can't delegate. But the partner is responsible for providing that TA. In the classic, NRCS is still providing the technical assistance in addition to all of our due diligence items. So it's going to look a lot like what a regular EQIP project would look like, or CSP project. And then underneath each of the project types, we have our funding pools. So we have the critical conservation area, which there's 2 critical conservation areas in Colorado. We have our state multi-state fund pool, and then the Inflation Reduction Act Fund Pool. So when you're considering project type for a proposal, you're going to ask who's providing the planning, who's doing the installation, and who's doing the checkout. If the answer is the partner, then you would want to submit your proposal as an alternative funding arrangement project. So here are these fund pools that I just mentioned. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. I think you might be able to, but there's 2 in Colorado. So we have the Colorado River Basin right here, western part of the state, and then the Prairie Grasslands region right here on the eastern part of the state. Then we have the state multi-state fund pool. And for the Inflation Reduction Act fund pool, I want to point out that you only apply to the state multi-state fund pool or the critical conservation area fund pool, which are Farm Bill fund pools. National determines whether you're eligible under the Inflation Reduction Act fund pool, and then they are the ones who would pool you from the fund pool that you applied under and award under the Inflation Reduction Act fund pool. So a little bit more information on the critical conservation areas. In order to apply under critical conservation area, you need to be addressing one of the 3 or 4 listed priority resource concerns within that critical conservation area. So within the Colorado River Basin CCA, you have excess insufficient water drought. If you're addressing that resource concern, then you can apply in that fund pool. How do you, as the partner, apply for RCPP? There's going to be a lot of pre-planning work. You need to identify a project need, a project area, the project scope, consider the appropriate questions, have conversations with NRCS staff at the field office level, state level, and in some instances, national level, and also conversations with the individuals with the local knowledge. So you would visit the How to Apply webpage. We don't have the 24 Notice of Funding Opportunity published yet, but it's good to reference the 23 Notice of Funding Opportunity. You gain portal access. Portal is the platform where you submit the proposal. It's also where, if awarded, you manage the proposal and agreement. So you submit a proposal under the fiscal year Notice of Funding Opportunity. And then this is the workflow for the partner proposal. So some of this is a little redundant, or in the process of changing, but we've had partners obtain eAuth access. You need your 2nd level eAuth access in order to gain access to the portal. So you'll gain your access. You'll develop your proposal within the portal, submit it. It goes through a review process, and then it's selected for funding. If awarded, we start to negotiate the programmatic partnership agreement. So this is referred to as the PPA. And if you're familiar with EQIP, I like to compare this to the 1202. So the contract that NRCS has with the landowner, except this is an agreement that NRCS has with the partner. So we spend approximately 3 to 6 months negotiating the terms of the programmatic partnership agreement. Once we have signatures, it's an active agreement. We negotiate the supplemental agreement, which is the obligating document. So when we have TA dollars, technical assistance dollars that need to be expended, we build that into a supplemental agreement. Similarly, for financial assistance dollars, those are all going to be built into a supplemental agreement for obligation. Once the supplemental agreement is signed, then that's an active obligation document. I'm not going to dive too deep into the different types of supplemental agreements, but there are 4 types of supplemental agreements, some specific to technical assistance dollars and some specific to financial assistance dollars and some specific to the activity type. Once we have the PPA and the SA, depending on whether it's a classic project or an AFA, alternative funding arrangement project, we have our project kickoff and announcements for landowners. And so whether it's the field office or the partner having those announcements will depend on whether it's an alternative funding arrangement project where the partner is providing the technical assistance or RCPP or NRCS providing the technical assistance. So this is the workflow for RCPP Classic project with an active PPA. So NRCS is going to have the announcements. We'll have landowner applications, our regular eligibility, ranking, assessments, contracting, NEPA processes, cultural resources. This is going to follow similar contracting to our other programs. NRCS has an active producer contract, and we follow the implementation that we do for our other programs. For an alternative funding arrangement project with an active PPA, we have partner announcements. The landowner applies to the lead partner. NRCS is still responsible for the due diligence items, so we'll work closely with the partner and the landowner for landowner eligibility, producer eligibility, our assessments, and then the partner is who holds the producer contract and provides the technical assistance. Then you have your implementation, and reimbursement is through a type 3 supplemental agreement. I have a couple project examples here. I'm not going to read all of the text on the slide, but the partner came to NRCS with a project goal. They decided that they wanted to submit the project as an alternative funding arrangement because they have the ability to provide the technical assistance. This was an engineering heavy project, so the partner is working with a technical service provider to provide the designs. They applied under the Colorado River Basin Critical Conservation Fund Pool, and the critical conservation area fund pool resource concern that they were addressing is excess insufficient water and drought. They have additional resource concerns that aren't listed as the primary resource concern under that CCA. And the activities are land management. So it's similar to EQIP. It has in-stream habitat improvement, structure for water control, those structural and vegetative practices that fall underneath land management. And then again, the implementation, the lead partner is providing the technical assistance on behalf of NRCS. So they're really implementing this program for NRCS. So this is another project example. We had a partner come to us with a project goal. They felt like they didn't have the technical capacity to implement this project on behalf of the NRCS. So it's really a partner-inspired but NRCS-led project. The fund pool they applied under is the other critical conservation area that falls in Colorado, the prairie grasslands region. They had to meet one of the primary resource concerns listed in that fund pool, which happened to be terrestrial habitat. They have additional resource concerns. The reason why I want to point this out is because they have long-term protection of land. So the activities that this project addresses are land management, rental, and entity-held easements. So we're going to have producer contracts, and we're going to also have parcel contracts for the entity-held easements. When considering easements as part of a component for your project, you have to have a conservation value statement, and these are included in the easement deeds. Reiterating that the implementation for this project is NRCS. NRCS is the one providing the technical assistance, and it'll look a lot like EQIP and ASEP. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not the most creative individual, so I love when partners come to me with project ideas. There's a lot of diversity in what a project can look like. So I just wanted to list a couple other examples for you here. We could have land management via a supplemental agreement and producer contracts. So an example of what this might look like as far as a project goes is that there's delivery ditches that need lining, and there's on-farm activities. Also for this type of project, you could have land management via supplemental agreements, an alternative funding arrangement. And so the partner is going to be providing the technical assistance to do the same type of work that I mentioned above, the delivery, ditch lining, and on-farm activities. Then we have watershed project via supplemental agreement. What this would look like is PL 566 like activities. So if you had several delivery ditches that you wanted to line, but no interest on-farm work, so no producer contracts, then it's going to be very similar to PL 566, and we call it a watershed project via supplemental agreement. This is a little more easement specific, so I'm not going to dive too deep into this. We have our entity held easements, our US held easements, our buy protect sell easements. You have 6 different minimum deed terms with or without US right of enforcement. The federal cost share varies depending on what the minimum deed term is, whether it includes right of enforcement or not, and whether the landowner is considered historically underserved. So I am sorry that I went a little bit over there, but I have resources listed on the slides, so I'll make sure to get the slides to you all, and if there's any questions.
I had a couple questions for you, Marissa. Is there a deadline to apply for this, or is it an ongoing application process?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. So our notice of funding opportunity hasn't been announced yet, but the deadline would be 3 months after the announcement of the notice of funding opportunity. We were anticipating the notice of funding opportunity being announced by the end of February, and we missed that mark. So I believe it'll be any day now.
Great. And then once someone applies, what's sort of the timeline for them to hear back and get a project started?
That's another really great question. It varies right now. So there's a 4-week review period for the states, and the national, when they have their review, that time varies. So it could likely be a couple months prior to knowing that they're awarded. And then we dive into the negotiation period, which should be about 3 months.
Gotcha. Great. And then my last question is, if a district has questions, should they reach out to you or to someone in their local NRCS office?
I would suggest reaching out to me first. I do like to include the field offices, especially if it's going to be a classic type project. Additionally, those local field offices just have knowledge that I might not be aware of. So like what the capacity is for them to implement, whether there's technical service providers in the area, whether there's not. So there's a lot of local knowledge that I do like to lean on field offices for, but I think starting the conversation with me is a good start.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions for Marissa? All right, I see a question in the chat. When would you use RCPP versus PL 566 when working on a watershed project, for example, ditch improvements?
Okay, that's a great question. So if you have a project that's going to be a watershed type project with no on-farm activities, and it'll be the most PL 566 like, excuse me, you're going to want to have conversations with me and you're going to want to have conversations with B. So B, and I can get you her contact information, or you can schedule a conversation with both of us at the same time. Reach out to me and I'll schedule a conversation with us at the same time. But it's really up to the partner whether they want to do a watershed project via supplemental agreement with RCPP or strictly go the PL 566 route. One thing to consider when going the RCPP route is that you have to have that watershed plan up front. So when you're submitting the proposal, if you don't have it when you're submitting the proposal, then you're going to want to identify in the proposal how you plan to provide the watershed plan. That's not covered by NRCS. And so
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just expand on that a little bit. So these are all watershed-like options, watershed activity-like options. The top one, land management via supplemental agreements and producer contracts. This is going to be the simplest RCPP project. And as you move down the list, it's more complex.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, Marissa, I just want to thank you so much for your time. We will go ahead and get these slides out to the conservation districts and as well as your contact information so that folks can start thinking about any sort of project they would like to implement and hopefully contact you with any questions to get started.
Great. Well, I appreciate everybody's time and definitely look forward to hearing from folks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.